Good morning. Don Palayo is checking in with you guys this morning. It's really early. It's the middle of the night, but my sleeping schedule is so screwed up. It is October 14th, Tuesday, and it is right now 2:53 in the morning. I know. Why am I awake? Well, I went to bed last night about, I don't know, I guess it was about 8:30. So my sleep schedule's so messed up. I got up this morning. I'm getting ready to study some of my CFP material. I have my book here for one of the books. There's actually like 6 or 7 books, and this is one of them. Fundamentals of Financial Planning, and you can see how thick that. That's just one of the books. It's like I have a stack of the books here too. It's like, I don't know if you guys can see that. That's a few more of them. I have so much fun with this. This is the for the Certified Financial Planner exam. It's not as bad as it looks. Some of it's more difficult. This book that I've got is pretty thick, but it's also most of it is pretty familiar information to me that I've known for years. There are some formulas and calculations in there that I'm going to have to try to remember. But to be honest, the income tax and estate planning sections are probably the two hardest books out of all this material. I'm gonna have to go back through that with a fine tooth comb. I'm not real. I don't like some of the way they set this exam up, because I want a certified financial planner is not going to get into the weeds on income tax, for example. It's like they need to know some fundamentals about income tax, and they need to know how, like, certain the tax rules on certain accounts like IRAs and things like that. But they get really into the weeds with a lot of this like business, like corporate, like tax and stuff, and it's like a CFP is never going to do that. Before they would bring in a CPA to do with, if it ever got to that to that point, they would be bringing in like a certified public accountant to handle some of those issues, to advise on those kinds of things. They're not gonna get into the weeds on that kind of stuff. Anyway, and the same thing with estate planning. It's like estate planning, I mean, I would think they would need to know a little bit more about, but it's like, we're not estate attorneys, we're not CPAs. A financial planner needs to know some of the fundamentals of this stuff, but I feel like it gets deeper than just fundamentals and that stuff. And it's like, to me, I would never get that deep, into tax law and estate planning without bringing in a professional, a CPA or an estate attorney. It's like, anyway. A financial planner's job is to know some of the fundamentals of that and know when to bring in experts in those fields when it's needed. So, especially if you're dealing with very affluent clients. Estate planning, you're not really going to deal with unless you're dealing with very affluent clients, really, because and the reason I say that is because, like, in terms of estate tax, and there, you don't really worry about estate tax unless you are super wealthy. You do want to. I think everybody should have estate documents. In terms of like a way of if something happens to you, see, here's the thing: if something happens to you and you don't have like a proper documentation, a will or trust or something like that set up, guess who gets to decide what happens to your stuff? The government does. The government gets to decide how things. Now, generally speaking, things will transfer over to your family, but not without a very expensive and time-consuming probate process, right? And it's just a big major pain in the rear end. I mean, it can literally take, depending on what kind of assets you're leaving behind, it can literally take years to get that transferred over to your family. And it's like you don't want your families to have to go through, your family members to have to go through a big painful process after you die. You want to make it as simple as possible for your family, and there's a few different ways of doing that. I don't know why. I guess I'm going to make my video about this today. I guess I'm thinking about this a lot right now because I'm taking out a new life insurance policy on myself for my kids, and I've kind of run into a little snag. It's not a major snag, but I have two daughters. My oldest daughter is just turned 21, but my youngest daughter is going to be turning 14 in December. Well, the life insurance company won't allow me to name my youngest daughter as a beneficiary because she's not 18 years old yet. So I'm trying to decide how I'm going to set up my beneficiaries on this because I want my youngest daughter to get her half. I want it to be split evenly between my two daughters. So I would either have to name another adult, maybe her mom. I'm hesitant to do that. I wish I trusted her mom more. It's like I'm worried that if I left the money to my ex-wife, to my youngest daughter's mom, I'm sure that my youngest daughter would benefit from it. Some of it. But I also am worried that if I left that money, $500,000 to my ex-wife, that she's gonna say, "Oh, goody, let's go to Hawaii." This money is not supposed to be used for that. This money is supposed to be used to help my daughter get through school, to maybe help fund a home purchase for her in the future, or something like that. That's what this money is for. It's not to go gallivanting, I want my daughter to enjoy her life and everything, and I'm sure my daughter would benefit from it, and I might wind up doing that. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. It's like, would you... I think most of the people that are listening to my channel are women, but it's like I just want to make sure that my two daughters are taken care of, and I want to trust my ex-wife that she would do the right thing by her child, by my daughter. It's like, but I don't know. Anyway, maybe I'll do that. I mean, once my youngest daughter turns 18, I can change the beneficiary and make her the primary beneficiary on the policy. But until then, hopefully I don't die in the next 4 years. I'm not planning on it. I'm only 49 years old, but I don't have any health problems that I know of. So, and I do get checked out regularly. I do have an appointment with an annual checkup with my primary care doctor in November. So, but I feel as fine as a 49-year-old can feel, right? I don't feel bad. I do feel, I don't know. I can tell that I'm aging because I do feel a little more tired than I used to. I tell you, man, I hear, and this might be a seasonal thing. This might just be because the days are getting longer and everything. But I feel more tired here lately. Like the last few weeks, I've been feeling a little bit more tired, and I think it's just the seasons, the going into the shorter days. My sleep schedule is also. I usually go to bed early, usually like 8 o'clock. I'm like literally in bed by like 8 o'clock, but I'm always waking up super duper early too. It's like, like here I am, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and here I am studying CFP stuff. So yeah, so my sleep schedule's a little out of whack, but anyway, I'm gonna get to studying some, and then I'll probably go to work, and I'm always the first person in the office. I always am. I usually get into the office by around 6 o'clock in the morning, and get my day started. I don't really jump right into work stuff. I'll check my email and go through the emails and make a to-do list of things I need to get done that day. And then, but then I usually like read the financial news, see what's going on with the markets, and because I like to know what's going on. Friday morning, I don't know, I was getting really bad vibes, and the market did collapse on Friday, but it wasn't until later in the day when things really got bad, because that was when Trump came out with talking about launching his tirade on China, right? So the market was a little bit down in the morning, but I'm feeling very uneasy about the market right now. I still am, even after the big jump we had yesterday on Monday. The market's really boomed yesterday, but if you noticed, silver was up like 7% yesterday. Gold and silver are just taking off, and there's a reason for that. A lot of these central banks are moving away from the dollar. China, these BRICS countries they're unloading their dollars, and they're replacing it with gold and silver. And I think they're pretty smart to be honest, I think they're smart for doing that. I don't blame them for doing that whatsoever, because I think a lot of us are losing faith in the dollar right now, and the dollar is losing its luster right now. It is still the currency of choice in terms of international trade, but it doesn't have its importance that it once had. They had something called the petrodollar, where all trades for oil had to be done in dollars there for a while. And I think a lot of those Middle Eastern countries are starting to get away from that. They're accepting other currencies, like the euro, like the Chinese, the yuan. So I don't know. I think the U.S. dollar is beginning to kind of lose its luster. It's just not as important as it once was. And that's going to make things a little bit harder, which in some ways, I don't want to say that I like it, because it's kind of like we're having to take our medicine a little bit. It's like we've got to stop being so dependent on other countries for things. And this is something that we've done to ourselves, is that we have become so dependent on cheap labor from overseas that, we've got to get away from that. And these corporations love it. They love cheap labor. It's like it's almost like the modern day version of slavery. It is. It's like these corporations, they'll go anywhere into any country if they can find a place where they can go and hire people for $1 an hour or whatever. They're going to do it. It's just the modern day version of slavery, and and it just depresses wages in all of the modern countries, because I mean people here need jobs, but it creates a plate. Well, the thing is, we're pretty much at or at least close to what's considered full employment here in the United States. Yes, we're at full employment because people are working; they don't have a choice, but in terms of underemployment, it's like people are having to work 2 or 3 jobs in order to survive. And it's because the wages are not where they really should be, because of all this cheap labor overseas that these companies are exploiting, and it's keeping wages depressed. I've always been, I'm a Republican. I've voted Republican my whole life, but there are a lot of things in terms of old school Democrat policies, not some of this modern stuff. The newer Democrats are a little bit kooky to me, but especially on social issues, but even economic issues, when they're leaning like towards, oh, let's make free stuff and all that. No, I don't believe in that. But when it comes to the old school labor, like unions and things like that, I really feel like we need a new labor movement here in the United States, and not even just in the United States, globally, because right now the corporations have been taking advantage of people overseas. And it has benefited people here in the West because we're able to get products cheaper. We're able to buy things cheaper. We're using people overseas to make things cheap. But if we held companies to a higher and held them to account for that, and we might need like maybe a more of a global minimum wage or something, because that's what these companies are doing. They're just taking the jobs wherever they can find people they can exploit. They're exploiting people. That's what they're doing. And it's not completely slavery, but it's like the next best thing, next to slavery. And I don't, and that shouldn't be allowed either. I think there needs to be a new workers' movement, which is kind of a leftist idea, but it's more of an old school policy from the left that I think workers around the world need to stand up and demand better treatment from business. We used to have unions, and the unions did that for us here. Now, back in the 60s, more like the 70s and early 80s, the unions started getting too big for their britches, and they started demanding more and more and more, and they got out of line, so the world started moving away from that because of all the demands they were making. It became a little too unreasonable. Well, now it's too much toward the business side, and the businesses are being exploitative, where these corporate executives are being paid 350 times what the workers are making. It's gotten too out of whack the other way. So I do feel like there needs to be a global, because it's not going to work if it's just in one country. Because if we just did it here in the United States, if workers stood up and started demanding, these companies are just going to take their jobs somewhere else, to another country where they can exploit the workers. So workers around the world need to demand better treatment higher pay and a better standard of living. The hard part with that is like look at China. If workers start pushing for better situation there, it's like, are you going to get thrown in prison, or are you going to be disappeared? You don't know how. People, they don't have the same freedoms in some of these other countries that we do here. So anyway, I don't know what the best answer, the best solution is to all of that, but the reason we're struggling here in the United States right now, and in like Western Europe too, is because companies are able to find labor overseas that they can exploit in East Asia, in Latin America, and in Africa. They're exploiting workers in those parts of the world to make us our cheap stuff that we buy at Walmart or wherever. But at the same time, I would just like to see the standard of living more, not equal, but more normalized. It would raise the costs. It would raise costs, but it would also, wages would increase, because if they don't have the cheap labor to exploit, and they have to pay normal, a normal standard of living, a normal wage, it would also, that would ripple through the entire world, right? Anyway, we're just I just think that workers we need to have a good old fashioned workers movement like we had back in the early part of the 20th century. So that's the way I look at it. Guys, let me know what you think. I'm going to start studying a little bit, and we'll hopefully we begin to see a little bit of ease on we had a few years there after COVID where we had some really high inflation rates. I think it's higher than what the government told us. I think the peak year, the government reported like 9% in one year. I think all of us can just sit back and look at how much the cost of everything has gone up and see that the government's numbers are pretty much baloney. And it doesn't matter who's in office either. It doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter. The government numbers are just complete fiction, in my view. When you've had housing prices go up the way they have, when you've had food prices go up the way they have, utility bills going up the way they have, it's much worse than what they're admitting to. So anyway, hopefully some of that starts finding its way back into wages, and wages start closing that gap a little bit, but we'll see. Anyway, you guys have a great day. I'm going to get started with my studies, and this is Don Palayo checking out.